Welcome everyone to our Wheel and Anchor webinar this morning called Baltic Seafarer. So this is our trip that is taking place in July of next year. Just a quick instructions for those of you who are new and who haven't participated in one of our webinars before. If you would like to ask a question, make a comment during the webinar, you will be on mute in the background, but all you need to do is scroll down to the bottom of your screen and click on the button marked chat. And that's where it'll open up a little window and you can ask any questions that you have or make any comments or whatever it is that you'd like to communicate. So on that note, let's jump right in and get started. So I would like to, as always, just give you a little bit of an overview about what Wheel and Anchor is all about for those of you who are new this morning. And so we're really an organization, a community that's about bringing travelers together. And so we differentiate ourselves in that our members are people who are already well traveled, and I'll say something about that in a moment, and who have an interest in. This is not about going on a vacation in the Caribbean and sitting on a beach, or it's or going to Florida or going on a golf holiday. This is about travel that is experiential. You learn something along the way. You meet other people, both locally in country, and most importantly, you're doing that together with other travelers who have a like-minded view about what travel should be all about. And so that's what our mission is here at Wheel and Anchor. My goal for each and every one of our members is that you become more well-traveled. And, I've met numerous members in events we've had here in Southern Ontario over the last couple of weeks. And by and large, everybody is already well-traveled. People have been to a lot of places. And this is about sort of taking the next step. Some of the destinations we have are familiar, some may be less familiar to you. The more you travel, the more you gain an understanding about the world, its cultures, the people, and you just become, I think, a more well-rounded person. And in the context of that, you also become connected, not only to the other people who are traveling along with the other members of Wheel and Anchor, but also to people in other countries. And we try to use our best efforts to find time, both in the program and outside the program, to stop and chat with people from other countries, because it opens up our perspectives. And as Canadians, I think we're really good at that, and we're so well received around the world. So that's what it's all about. This morning on our webinar, joining me as usual. So I'm Gordon, the founder of Wheel and Anchor. You may have come across me once or twice before, I hope, in our newsletters or on our website. I'm joined by Joel Curry, who's my co-founder and who provides our technical support. So when something goes wrong, I point the finger at him, just kidding. And of course, Cassandra McKinnon. She's actually not with us this morning. She's out on holiday this week. I had to shoo her out the door. She's been working so hard lately. So she's actually not here on our webinar, but she's otherwise always available to take your calls, loves to chat with our members and provide information about our tours. Our plan today, it's really about is soliciting some interest in the Baltic countries, in the southern Scandinavian, or I should say the Scandinavian countries, of which actually only Sweden is Scandinavia, of course. Finland and Russia are not part of Scandinavia, and of course neither is Estonia. That's why we refer to them as the Baltic countries. And for those of you that are interested in that, traveling through this region, discovering what it's all about, I'm going to be the guide. I'm going to take you on this little journey by webinar through these countries, what we can expect to see along the way, some of the experiences that we'll have. And that is what this webinar is all about. And that's where we're heading next July of 2020. Let's look at the region overall. The Baltic Sea is interesting because, of course, it's sort of linked to the Atlantic Ocean, but it's actually a brackish inland sea that is connected by those small straits that separate Denmark from Sweden. And so the water is not as salty as it is in the big oceans. And as a result, it's sort of known to be this large body of brackish water, and it has one arm up to the north, the Gulf of Bothnia. We're of course focused on the area in the sort of northeastern part of the Baltic Sea, beginning in Stockholm, ending in Tallinn, Estonia, That's what the focus of our journey on is. And what's an interesting point about this trip is that we're visiting all coastal cities, and they all have a unique character and they all have a different relationship to the sea, and they have some wonderful archipelagos. So if you like coastal towns and seas, then you're in the right place, because they are quite they're quite unique in their character. Taking a look at the map of where we're going to be going along the way on this trip, we're going to be starting off in Stockholm, and that's where we're going to fly into. That, of course, is the capital of Sweden and sits on this magnificent archipelago, as I was just saying. And we're going to spend a few nights there before we head up to the Åland Islands, and do a little tour around there. It's not a place that a lot of tourists, travelers from overseas will visit. We'll then head into Helsinki, the capital of Finland, then over to St. Petersburg, which of course needs no introduction, as the second largest city in Russia, and ending up in Tallinn. You probably have seen an itinerary similar to this before. And, I designed this because a lot of people go on these big cruise ships to do a tour of the Baltic and say, oh, I've been here and here and here. This is not one of those cruises. I'm not even I'll save the expletives, because I think that each of these places is far more deserved than spending from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. and say that you've been to Stockholm. You can't get a sense of it. And that's why we designed it to follow a similar path, but yet taking the time to really get a little bit in depth into each of these cities, which I love. I love all of these cities. I think that they're truly, truly amazing. So without further ado, let's jump into the program itself. We will head out on the last day of June. We've picked summer to do this program. It goes without saying, it's the best time of the year. It's midsummer, of course, the summer equinox at the end of June. So we have very, very long days up here. The sun will often not set until 11 o'clock at night in Stockholm or Helsinki. So you really get to explore and see what life is like, because Scandinavia, the Baltic countries, come alive at this time of the year. And that's what's so exciting about it. So we'll fly out of Canada, we'll arrive, we'll fly, you'll have to take a fly by a gateway city, typically Frankfurt or Munich is what we often do, to arrive then in Stockholm, Arlanda Airport, taking their amazing airport rail link that whisks us downtown Stockholm, where we will begin our trip. And we're staying at a lovely hotel I picked out that's right adjacent to the railway station in the heart of the city. It's walking distance to most of the things that we're going to do in and around the city. And that's another interesting thing about this tour that makes it a bit unique, because we are going to take tours by a minibus or a coach to go a little bit further a stream. We're going to also travel by boat and canal boat to see some different things. But we're going to also avail ourselves of the local public transport, and they have great transportation systems. So in Stockholm, for example, we're going to hand you a Stockholm card, so you can go and meander around a bit and take the subway, take the buses, the trams. They're so easy to get around. They're so clean. It's wonderful, and I think it's a great way to experience the place as the locals live there, as opposed to just always being like a tourist saddled up in a bus. In any event, we'll arrive in Stockholm probably around midday or early afternoon on our first day, and we'll start to shake off those jet lag cobwebs with a refreshing walk around the old town called Gamla Stan. And this is where you'll find, among other things, the Swedish royal palace. Sweden, of course, has a royal family. And they live in a number of different places, but their principal palace is right on a little island called Gamla Stan. Stockholm is situated on a whole archipelago of islands. So like I was saying at the outset, it's all about the water. Everything is about the relationship to the water. There's bridges, there's ferries, there's little boats that take you around. It's my favorite city in Scandinavia. So again, this is the only country in Scandinavia on this tour, but comparing it to Copenhagen, Oslo, Stockholm, this is my favorite one. I just love it. I've been here a number of times. So we won't take on too much today. Again, we'll have a little orientation tour with our local guide. He'll show us around Gamla Stan, orient you to what is where. And because we're so centrally located, you can just walk around, stretch your legs, and just relax. Not too busy on the first day after a long flight over the Atlantic to get to Sweden. The next day, then, we'll start off with our full day program. or at least when I say full day, I always qualify that we generally don't leave before 9 o'clock in the morning, unless we have to go and catch a train or a ferry in this case. But for the most part, we like to have a bit of a leisurely time so that you can enjoy the hotel and the breakfast, and not have to sort of get up at some early hour in the morning. Our highlight for today's trip will be the Stockholm City Hall, Ratshus as they call it in Swedish. And this place is, first of all, a very interesting building. This picture doesn't really even do it justice, but it's sort of this reddish brick, very commanding looking building on an area of town called Kungsholmen, which is very close to the part of the city that we're staying. And it's famous because the Nobel Prizes are awarded here every year. Not the Nobel Peace Prize, which of course is awarded in Oslo, but all of the other ones, literature, music, chemistry, all those other Nobel Prizes are awarded here every year because, of course, Alfred Nobel was a Swede. So our focus of our day will be around this. I visited this place a couple of times myself. It's quite a magnificent building. And the whole story about Alfred Nobel and his legacy and the Nobel Prizes is really part of what we'll gain a bit of an understanding into today. And then we'll have time in the afternoon to wander around Kungsholmen. They've got lovely little bars and cafes and terraces along the waterside here. And again, you can walk back to the hotel and in and around Stockholm. It's a very, very walkable city. So then we'll have dinner, I think, on our own this evening. So what we've done on this program, is with many programs, is we typically have a lunch or a dinner included every day, but not both. That way you can choose whether you want to have a big meal. They have terrific restaurants there. It's a little place I always go to in Gamla Stan called Fem Små Hus, which is 5 small houses, 5 little houses that are stuck together. And every time I go there, it's a very Swedish experience. In the meantime, there are tourists that go there too, but it's one of these sort of iconic little restaurants in the middle of the city. The next day, we will have yet another tour, but we're going to now leave the city center itself to explore a little bit of this archipelago of Stockholm. The archipelago is, I remember the first time I was there, and subsequent times, you venture out, and for those of you that live in the Ontario area and you're familiar with Georgian Bay and the 30,000 islands, I swear you can close your eyes and open them up again, and it's very reminiscent of that. Rocky little islands and islets. There's also 30,000 of them, just like in here at home in Georgian Bay, but it's different because they have cottages. They're in that unique sort of Scandinavian style with this, these reddish, these pastel colors. It's just charming, beautiful, beautiful landscape. We'll stop in here at Sandhamn, which is, of course, Sand Harbor, and it's a sort of a hub of pleasure boating and so on. In the summertime, you'll see how hustling and bustling it is with all the people that are sort of enjoying their holidays. So we get really a little bit of a sense of what life is like for the Stockholmers, who, of course, do their cottaging in this area, in this wonderful archipelago. The next day, we're going to head out in the early morning by ferry. So we're going to take a transfer down to the ferry pier and make our way towards our next stop. And we'll once again get a chance to go through a different part of the archipelago and this is one of my favorite parts about traveling by ferry, is because it passes through some of this magnificent landscape as we make our way to Mariehamn and the Åland Islands. So the Åland Islands is quite a special place, and it's this group of islands that's nestled between Sweden and Finland. And most travelers, tourists coming from North America wouldn't stop here. But of course I do, or we do, because they're a unique place. They're actually part of Finland, and yet something like 90% of the people there speak Swedish. So it's a very different sort of a spot. Its main sort of economic activity it's all about shipping and fishing and tourism to a certain extent, but it's a duty-free port. And that's why a lot of both Finnish and Swedes come to Mariehamn if they're transiting in between these places, because they go on shore, they buy their duty-free alcohol, and then they take it home, because, of course, in Sweden and Finland, duties on alcohol are quite high, and so that's why this place is a stop-off point. But it's worth more than just spending an hour here. That's why we're going to spend a night. We're going to explore a little bit of Mariehamn. The first day we'll have a leisure to just wander around this charming, charming little town with its quaint houses and so on. We'll spend an overnight there, have a little bit more time in the morning before we then, in the afternoon of July the 5th, we're going to head out by minibus or coach, and we're going to drive up again in its archipelago, which again, the geology here is a little bit different than in Stockholm, similar but different. So we're going to head up to a part of the island called Bomarsund, which is a place where we can explore a bit of the history of the area, because the Russians occupied this island. They built this relic back in the early part of the 18th century, and it was sort of an outpost for Russia for a long time, until, of course, the Crimean War happened. Then the Swedish and the French and the English came in and basically kicked them out, and stayed around long enough so that they couldn't rebuild this fortress. So that all that's left is this ruin. But it's important because it sort of signifies a little bit the beginning of the relations between Scandinavia and Russia. And that's, beyond the beautiful scenery, we'll get a bit of insight because these Åland Islands and this area around was instrumental in those developing relations over time. So as I say, we'll have spent a good sort of 36 hours in Mariehamn. We'll have a lovely dinner there that evening before we jump on board the ship later that night and head from Åland to Helsinki. And we'll in the morning when we wake up, we'll pass the southern coast of Finland, pulling into the port of Helsinki, which sits on its own archipelago. It's not quite as dramatic and as many islands as you have in Stockholm, but still very picturesque. We'll pull in and we'll head straight to prison. Now, actually, we're going to our hotel, but the hotel that I've picked out for this one is a bit unique because it actually was a prison, and it was converted back well over 100 years ago into a hotel. Once again, situated in a very good location, close to everything you can walk around all parts of central Helsinki. Once again, we'll have a Helsinki card here. And so this is part of what I like to do, because many of these cities in Europe have these city cards, and they're so handy because, we have part of our programs that are programmed. We have a guide, we do some interesting things. We see some of the main sites, but the joy of travel, the beauty of travel, particularly in Scandinavia, where everybody speaks English and it's so easy to get around. You need to just get out, wander around, take this card and just find stuff and go and get lost. You can't get that far lost. You will, of course, visit on our orientation tour. So after we arrive, we'll go to the hotel, and it will be early in the morning, or it will be sort of probably mid-morning when we arrive. So we'll have a few hours before we can check in, and we're going to go and we're going to have a look at this cathedral, this stunning white cathedral. It's so funny because it's one of the most unique buildings that I've seen. It's in contrast to all of the rest of the buildings, which tend to be sort of, chalky yellowish kind of color. And then you have this striking church in the middle of the city. We'll go and have a visit of that. And we're also going to go and do a coffee tasting, because the Finns are, believe it or not, the #1 coffee drinkers in the world. You wouldn't think that. You would probably think that the Italians were or something like that, but it's actually the Finns per capita drink more coffee than anywhere else. We're going to taste their coffee, and we're going to find out why. So later that afternoon, we'll have again time at leisure, wander around, take your Helsinki card, go to see, there's art museums, there's the rock church, which we're going to see the following day. There's so many different things to do. So actually not the following day, the day after that is when we'll go over and see the rock church. The following day of our trip, we're going to head out to a town called Porvoo. Because much like we went outside of town in Stockholm and in Mariehamn, each of these places, it's important to get out to the countryside a little bit. And Porvoo is an 800-year-old medieval town. It's just under an hour away from Helsinki. It's not far, and it has a fascinating long history. There's all of these sort of colorful buildings, some of them that date back almost 800 years, and they have neat little shops, and it gives you a sense of what rural life in Finland is all about. It's a little bit touristy, but it's at the same time it's quite authentic, and it's a favorite place for a lot of people to go. They have this delicious almond cake, the Runeberg's cake, which is quite delicious. One of the things that we'll taste when we're there. And then on our way back, instead of taking the coach back, we'll actually ride on a boat and have a leisurely journey along the coast. We'll get to see some of what this Finnish coastline actually looks like. So that'll be our tour on day 8. Then the next day, day 9, we have a full day at leisure. So I've provided for this in pretty much all of our stops that we have enough time to explore on your own. Again, you've got that Helsinki card. You can go around. You can see, if you're art fans, they have an incredible contemporary art museum. They have several art museums, actually, some very unique works that are displayed there. We can go and see that rock church. This is an underground church that was hewn right out of the rock. So the walls are all rock. Helsinki is built on rock, like much of the geology in all of this part of southern Scandinavia, or Scandinavia, the Baltic region, and they actually managed to excavate, hundreds of tons of rock to create this very, very unique church. Some of you who are interested, in history and castles and fortresses, at the front of Helsinki, we'll pass it when we come in by ferry, is Suomenlinna Fortress. You take a little ferry over, and you could spend literally an entire day or more exploring all of the bastions, all the embankments on this incredible island, this fortress called Suomenlinna. You might want to hop on a canal boat. So many things to do, and yet you'll be able to do as much or as little as you would like. And of course, I'll be hosting this tour, and I will take you some of the spots that I've been before when I've been to Helsinki. It's been some years since I visited here, and I can't wait to go back. That evening, we're going to hop on a ferry yet again. This time, it's going to be an overnight ferry. So we're going to depart around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening on our ferry that is going to take us to Russia. So these ferries, this is the main way that people get between the cities. Of course, you can fly between all these cities, but I think a lot of people travel by ferry. They're gigantic. They're like cruise ships almost in size. So it's an experience in and of itself. And everybody will have a cabin. So you'll be able to have a good night's rest on board the ferry. And then you will wake up in the morning and we will be in Russia. And not only in Russia, but we'll be in St. Petersburg, which is a incredibly beautiful, rich, vibrant city. I think, compared to Moscow, which is sort of very staid and it's obviously the capital and, very, very communist. But St. Petersburg is a little bit more laid back, or at least as laid back as the Russians can get. And so we're going to spend a full 4 nights here in St. Petersburg, because I think it's worth the time. There's so much to see. And most people, if you go on a cruise, some cruises will say, "Oh, we stay overnight. We spend 2 days in St. Petersburg." I mean, you need a week just to see the Hermitage. So we're going to arrive into St. Petersburg in the morning. We're going to head right off. We're going to get picked up at the pier, and we're going to go out and explore this city, which also sits. It also has a close relationship to the water. There's like 65 rivers. There's 42 islands that make up the city, and well over 200 bridges. That's why they call it the Venice of the North. So we're going to first do a tour by vehicle, and then later on in the afternoon after lunch, we're going to go out on one of these canal boats, because back in the 18th century, St. Petersburg was the main form of transportation around the city was by canal. So you'll get a bit of a sense of perspective on, looking at these buildings, looking at the city by canal boat. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll stay overnight. I've picked a absolutely charming 4-star hotel in St. Petersburg, because once again, we see all these wonderful buildings like the Hermitage and St. Isaac's and Peterhof and all these wonderful sites that we're going to see. And I wanted that the hotel, the flavor, the style of the hotel, which it's like a little mini Hermitage in the sense that it's ornate design, and we're paying a little more for it, but the experience, I think it's part of the experience to have a hotel that sort of epitomizes a little bit of the flavor of the city. So anyway, without further ado, our next day, our first full day in St. Petersburg is going to be all about the Hermitage. Before we go to the Hermitage, we are going to go to St. Isaac Cathedral. That is that famous, it's not in the picture here, that's that famous cathedral with the golden dome that's like 300 feet high that you can see from all over the city. So we're going to stop there in the morning and then have lunch and go to the Hermitage in the afternoon. And I just want to explain, there's method in my madness. The Hermitage is a very, very busy place. It's the one of the largest museums in the world. And this is summertime, it's busy. So everybody else rushes to get in the door at 9 o'clock. We're not going to do that. We will head over in the afternoon, and probably mid-afternoon. The best time to visit the museum is on Thursdays and Fridays. In fact, we're going on a Friday, and we'll probably, it may be a little bit busy when we arrive. We can't avoid it, but the time to visit is sort of after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It quiets down a bit, and you can take as much or as little time to view some of the 2.7 million pieces of art. They're not all on display, obviously. There's 1,000 rooms. Like, as I said, you could spend literally a week here in the Hermitage itself. And so it's quite a place. It's right up there with the Louvre and with the Prado Museum in Madrid and all of the world's great museums. This will undoubtedly be one of the most memorable stops on the trip. So many memorable stops, but the Hermitage, to say you've been at the Hermitage, I think it makes you a worldly person. So that'll be that day. The next day, we're going to head out of town a little bit to the south. We're going to go down to Peterhof. And so Peterhof is a complex that was inspired by Peter the Great. So you'll know Peter the Great was a ruler from back in the early part of the 18th century. And he traveled to Versailles in Paris, and he saw that and he said, I want one of those. And so needless to say, he went back to try to outdo it. And the buildings are spectacular, but the gardens, like you see here in the picture, the gardens, the fountains, the waterfalls that they built are truly, truly amazing. We'll spend quite a bit of time to get a sense of this place, obviously designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's mind-boggling to think about these places. It's just one of many, many things to see in St. Petersburg, and we will truly. I think you'll be very, very impressed by the grandeur of all of this. So that'll be our day in Peterhof. I say we'll head out by bus. Because I like to switch it up a bit, we're gonna head back to St. Petersburg by hydrofoil, and that'll allow us to zoom again through this archipelago. Once again, St. Petersburg, all those islands. We'll zoom past Vladimir Putin's house, actually, among other places that we'll see along the shoreline outside of St. Petersburg. Then we will have, again, a full day at leisure. And it's very important to me that, you come to a city like St. Petersburg. A lot of people will only visit here once in your life. You need time to just wander around. And there's tons of things to do. So depending, if you are somebody that really is an art lover, you probably will not have had enough time on the first day we were there to see all of the Hermitage. You might want to head back to the Hermitage. If you're a little bit of a connoisseur of food and spirits, we might wander over and do the vodka museum and do a little caviar and vodka tasting. That's kind of up my alley. So I'll definitely be dragging some of our members along to do that. We also do offer an optional tour this day for those that are keen on maximizing their experience of museums, and we'll go to the Yusupov Palace, which is where Rasputin was murdered, and we'll hear a little bit about the story behind what they say is the true story behind the murder of Rasputin. So that's another thing that you can do today. You might just want to wander around and watch the local people, the Russian people, in their sort of day-to-day activities, sitting out on one of the massive squares. That's, I think, part of every experience when you travel to a place like this. We'll have the last dinner this evening. We still have a whole other day on the next day, but this will be our last chance for dinner. We'll spend it at Moskva restaurant. which has a great rooftop terrace. We'll have a great view, something like what you see here, overlooking the city, for our last dinner in St. Petersburg, and then that'll bring us to our last full day here. And we'll head out in the morning. We'll check out of our hotel. We'll go down to Catherine Palace, and once again, an incredible facility. Facility is the wrong word for it. It's a palace, right? It was built for the Romanovs, which was, of course, was this Russian Tsar family that existed until the end of that empire, until they were sadly murdered prior to the First World War. There's like 100 kilograms of gold, they say, that is built into all of these facades. You get a sort of a bit of a sense of it from the picture here. Once again, an amazing building. We'll have a chance to visit it. Afterwards, we'll head off for lunch to quite a famous place. It's probably the most famous Russian restaurant anywhere, called Podvorye. And it's so famous that all of the or not all of them, but many visiting dignitaries will come to this special log house. The late Jacques Chirac has been there, and Prince Charles has been there. All these guys have dined here, and you'll get the chance to say that you dined as well at Podvorye, this Russian restaurant. So we'll have a late lunch. From there, we'll head over to the pier, and we'll jump again once on our last ferry ride, where we will head out from St. Petersburg in the latter part of the afternoon and make our way to Tallinn, Estonia. So Tallinn is a special city. So we'll stay once and again overnight, private cabins on the ship, and we'll wake up in the morning and we will be in Estonia. And, Tallinn, again, there are 3 Baltic states: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Estonia is, arguably the most the most up and coming, the most forward, the most innovative of the cities. And Tallinn, the capital, it's kind of like Tallinn is to Finland as Prague is to Frankfurt, as to Berlin, right? This contrast between West and East, and it's a very favored place for Finlanders to go for a weekend getaway, weekend break. It's obviously a lot less expensive than it is up in Finland, and so we get to spend our last couple of days here. It's truly a beautiful city, and this picture just captures a little bit of the beauty of it. The old town, which sort of sits up elevated like you see here, has a whole labyrinth of tunnels that were built in the 17th century, and they didn't really even pay much attention to them until about 10 years ago. And so now you can go in and you can visit some of these old tunnels. We'll spend the first part of the morning there on an orientation tour. We'll get to see the walls that surround the old town. Much of them, about almost 2 kilometers of the overall walls, are still intact. So much like other walled cities in Europe, it's really quite remarkable. Tallinn is a beer town, so we're going to have to go, we will go and we will visit one of the craft beer pubs in Tallinn, and they certainly don't serve any Heineken there, and we'll get a chance to sample the great beer that they make in Estonia. Later on that afternoon, we'll make a stop also inside the old town at Reapteek Pharmacy, which is this very cool medieval pharmacy. And they still make a wine there, which oddly enough, they call claret. And so we're going to taste some of this claret. The recipe they've used to make this medieval wine hasn't changed in 600 years. 605, between 500 and 600 years. Anyway, it's very, very old. But when you think of claret, it's nothing like you'll drink in Bordeaux. I'll tell you that right now. But nevertheless, it's kind of a neat experience, and it takes you back in time. Even the guide that takes you around is dressed up in this medieval costume. So it's really, really quite fun. We will, as we have done in both Stockholm and Helsinki, and also in St. Petersburg, the following day we're gonna head out to the countryside. And in particular, we're going to go to Lahemaa National Park, which is one of Estonia's prides. It sits along the archipelago, so along the coastline. It is very, very, very biodiverse. It's in this place called the Land of Bays. So there's like 700 kilometers of landscape dotted with islands and bays. Again, you'll see similarities to what we saw in Stockholm or Helsinki, but once again, unique in and of its own right. And out here, we'll visit a historical manor house. We'll have lunch at a local tavern, and have a true sort of rural Estonian meal. So, you have to get a flavor of these cities. And again, this is the benefit of this trip versus, just stopping in on a cruise ship for a few hours, is we get to go out into the countryside and experience what life was like, and what life still is like for people that live in the rural part of Estonia. So that'll be our day there. And then we'll get to our last full day of the trip. And once again, a full day at leisure to explore Tallinn. There's so many different things that you could do there. I personally think just wandering around and getting lost in the old town, much like you would in Venice or Prague or Krakow or any of these cities, just wandering around, people watching, taking a sip of coffee, having a beer, that is the way to truly get a sense, a flavor of, the pace of life. You might want to wander over, though. I'm certainly very interested to go over to this area of the town called Teleskivi, which is a creative city they built out of an old Soviet industrial complex, and they transformed it into studios and galleries and little restaurants and boutiques, and that's where the young people come. Estonia has really tried to be a forefront in technology innovation, in their banking systems, in so many different ways. They've gone out on taking great strides to bring their economy from the dark days of Soviet times. And you'll see evidence of that, particularly at a place like Teleskivi. So this is one of the things that we could do. Most of what you can do in Tallinn that we need to do is all on foot. And so you'll have plenty of time to enjoy it on the last day. And then our trip will sadly come to an end. By the middle of July, we'll be packing up and flying out once again to head back home. For those of you that are interested, and this is where I'm very curious to get feedback from anybody from any of our members interested in this tour. I haven't put all the details together. We're contemplating an extension program to Latvia and Lithuania. This program, of course, already 18 days in duration. So I didn't want to include another week because it becomes quite long. But visiting the capital cities of Riga and Vilnius is quite special as well. So we're going to put that in there as an option without any details, and we'll just sort of we'll gauge how much interest there is in going to Latvia and Lithuania, and if our members say, yeah, let's go, then we'll put together some details. So let me give you an overview now of the details of our Baltic Seafarer program happening in July of next year. First of all, to the price. So this program is priced at $68.80 Canadian dollars based on double occupancy. And there is a bit of a single supplement. We are in the middle of peak season here. So it's difficult to get any deals for solo travelers, but we have a Companions for the Road program. So if you are a solo traveler and you want to meet up with somebody, I'm sure I'm optimistic that we can find you somebody to travel with on this great program. What does it include? As usual, it includes pretty much everything that you need. So of course, all of our transfers and ground transportation, the hotels, which are really 4-star. We spent quite a bit of time parsing through the different hotel options. They're lovely hotels, breakfast every day. We have 3 nights accommodation on ferries. So once again, you'll have a private cabin. They're not fancy, but you're just overnight. So they certainly do the job and allow you to get a good night's rest. As I mentioned before, lunch or dinner every day. We've got boat tours in Stockholm, in Porvoo. I forgot to put on here as well. Of course, included is the hydrofoil tour in St. Petersburg on our way back from Peterhof. English guides where we need them. The city cards, I didn't put that on here. Oh yes, I did. A city card, Stockholm, Helsinki, and Tallinn will provide you a city card as well for that last day. So if you do want to venture a little bit further from the city, that you can. And of course, the program will be hosted by yours truly, and I look forward to doing that. What's not included, we have to mention always, of course, trip cancellation, medical insurance is extra. We highly recommend that. Any other meals and beverages, and your Russian visa. So we will provide assistance. We'll provide the letter that you need to get the Russian visa. It's a little bit of an ordeal, but we'll do our best to support you to make sure that it's a relatively smooth process. And then of course the airfare. So we have, as of late, been leaving airfares separate from our program, only because our members are coming from all across Canada, and we wanted to offer as much flexibility with the routing and the airline and so on as possible. So there's a million ways to get there, but if you look at your main carriers, Lufthansa with Air Canada offer the best connections to get to Stockholm and coming back from Tallinn. So here you get a little bit of a sense of the pricing, depending if you're coming from the east, $1,400, that's including tax. And from the west, it's a little bit more. But then if you are coming from Calgary, Vancouver, you can fly directly to Frankfurt and then connect up to Stockholm from there. So you don't need to come and visit us in Toronto along the way. There are other routes available as well. And as I've expressed to many members of late, you might want to take Iceland Air and stop in Reykjavik for a stopover and a swim in the Blue Lagoon on the way. There's lots of ways to get there. Have it work for you, and we will support you in that. So I'm going to come up to the Q&A session, so please get your questions ready. I see a couple have already come in during our webinar. If you do have any questions or thoughts subsequently, please drop us a note. Always thrilled to talk to our members. Cassandra will take care if you would like to book the program, and any other questions or feedback whatsoever. So let's address now a couple of the questions. Linda asked about, she said, can you tell us more about the ferry cabin? So as I mentioned, these ships are very large ships. They hold between 1,000 and 1,500 passengers. The Viking Line, the Silja Line are the ones that we typically use in this part of the world. The cabins are small. I mean, they're about 70, 80 square feet. They're really just enough for two small beds. We're not actually taking the most basic cabins. We've organize this so that we have cabins where you don't have to climb up to the bunk on the top. We're not going to make you do that, but they're small, but very clean. It's Scandinavia, very clean, very efficient. We'll have breakfast on the ship, where applicable. We'll have dinner on the ship, just traveling by ferry is a neat sort of experience. So they're comfy. I think you'll be quite happy. James asked, what's the cuisine like? Well, these are all coastal towns, James, and so needless to say, there is a lot of fish in their diet throughout the itinerary. But Stockholm Swedish cuisine, also has the same sort of diversity. More and more you're seeing as well vegetarian and vegan cuisine coming to the forefront in the Baltics. So really, they can accommodate all appetites. In Sweden, I love the smorgasbord. Which is this buffet of various dishes and smoked fishes and various vegetables and berries and all kinds of different things that they eat, and stew. They have this marvelous fish stew in Sweden. Finland, once again, maybe in Finland you want to try reindeer, because of course they have a plethora of reindeer in the northern part of Sweden. The food is similar but different. A little bit salty, some people find in Helsinki, but generally speaking, I think you'll enjoy it. And in Russia, well, we're just going to eat borscht every day. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to eat borscht every day. A city like St. Petersburg has an international array of restaurants. In the meantime, we're going to try both Russian food, which is quite hearty, quite sauces and meats and potatoes, like you would expect, like you'd find in other parts of Eastern Europe. But at the same time, very delicious. And in Estonia, they have their, again, the cuisine is not that different than Sweden or Finland. But it's, they focus a lot more on the beef and the pork and so on. Although, of course, they have seafood options as well. So food is really quite good. Don't worry. We'll make sure you enjoy every morsel, James. Peter asked, the currency in Estonia. So Estonia is now on the euro, has been for some years. So that does, so this is interesting. So Finland and Estonia are on the euro. Sweden still has its own currency, of course, the Swedish kroner. and of course in Russia the ruble. So you will have to sort of juggle a few currencies there. But the good thing is in all these places, credit cards are basically ubiquitous. You almost don't even need any cash. And I always carry a local currency for those that require it. So it's you won't be in a situation where you're too stuck. You don't have to worry about that. And ATMs are ubiquitous. And Tracy asked you if do you have any recommendations to visit in Europe after the program? And well, from Estonia, so I mentioned the extension program. So you could, and again, if we have enough interest from members, we'll continue on for another few days in Riga and Vilnius. Those are logical choices because we can access them by train or by local coach. But let's face it, air connections in Europe are so easy now. Flying out of Tallinn, you can get down easily to Poland, for example. If you want to visit Warsaw or Krakow or Gdansk, for example, you could fly over to Germany, of course, and visit the northern part of Germany, like Hamburg or Bremen or Schwerin or the cities in that part. So this is the beauty of travel in Europe is that you can just go online, and I'm just about to head to Europe in end of October, and it's very surprisingly inexpensive to get around. And Diane asked, is there a wine culture? Yes, there is a wine culture. None of these countries are wine producing countries. They're just too far north. And so they enjoy their wine, but what you'll find in Sweden and in Finland is that wine is quite expensive because it is imported, obviously, and they put very high duties on all of their alcoholic beverages. So while there is a wine culture, you may find for the pocketbook that beer is a better option. Vodka, of course, in St. Petersburg, but for those that really enjoy their wine, you can get it. It just won't be local. Good. And I think that is it for the questions this morning. So once again, if you do have any other questions at all, please send me a note, send Cassandra a note, and we'd be happy to answer your questions and would love to have you on board. This is one of my favorite parts of Europe, Scandinavia, the Baltic region, very diverse, the dichotomies between East and West. We see it all, and it's going to be great. So please do join us. And the brochure will be available in just a day or two. Hopefully by this weekend in the newsletter, it'll be out, failing which we'll make sure we get a copy to everybody that participated in the webinar today, as well as a copy of the recording so that you can follow up with us, and it'll be on our website as well. So on that note, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.